Sharks and rays. They are often dismissed as monsters of the sea. But these majestic, enigmatic creatures are actually essential wardens of our marine environment. Found in every ocean across the world, they play a fundamental role in ensuring balance and stability in our oceans. Sadly, this role is jeopardized by overfishing and habitat loss. Around 3 billion people rely on fish as their primary source of protein. Ongoing declines in shark populations could have devastating and unpredictable impacts on marine food webs and even our own food supply. The plight of sharks and rays was the spark for the Save Our Seas Foundation, founded over 15 years ago. Through the funding and support of research, conservation, and education initiatives, we are dedicated to safeguarding the future of sharks and rays. Today we have 3 centers based in Seychelles, South Africa, and the USA. Since 2003, we have funded over 300 projects on over 60 species in over 50 countries. We have also partnered long-term with several projects, including the Shark Spotters in South Africa, the Shark Lab in the Bahamas, and the Manta Trust. We're passionate about our mission: protect the future of sharks and rays and our oceans for generations to come. We can and will make a difference. The Save Our Seas Foundation.
I used to actually be terrified in any water where I couldn't see the bottom. Tales of monsters lurking in the deep. What are these enigmatic, crazy creatures? The first recognizable ancestors of sharks existed before trees, whereas now they could be facing collapse in a single generation. I actually think it's very hard to know just how much you love something until you lose it. Grief is the price we pay for love. The thing that drove me on this path was a pure passion for the animals themselves. I didn't start out wanting to save them because I didn't know that they needed saving or help. This one's for the ocean. I realized that if we want to help save sharks, we need to make sure they have safe places to live in.
Sharks and rays. They are ancient, enigmatic, misunderstood, and essential to our oceans. But these important animals are under immense pressure. As the Save Our Seas Foundation, we're here to help. Through supporting research, conservation, and education, we work to ensure a future for sharks and rays. The Save Our Seas Foundation. Together, we can make a difference.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Save Our Seas Foundation Distinguished Speaker Series. We're so happy to have you. My name is Lance. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at the Museum of Discovery and Science in sunny South Florida, Fort Lauderdale to be exact. We're happy to have you all here, and tonight welcoming a new distinguished speaker. Dr. Alice Rogers will be joining us this evening, telling us all about her research having to do with Sevengill sharks, and how climate change might be affecting them in New Zealand. So she's coming to us from tomorrow. Actually, it's Thursday, Friday morning in New Zealand right now. A few things just before we get started, though. If anyone ever finds themselves in South Florida, please come on by the Museum of Discovery and Science. This is our lovely museum. Our mission is to connect people to inspiring science. So we're going to endeavor to do that this evening, connecting you to some pretty amazing and inspiring research. There's 4 kind of pillars that guide everything we do here at the museum. Physical science education, early childhood education, health and wellness, and tonight, environmental sustainability. That's my purview. As I said, I'm the director of environmental sustainability here at the museum, and I think that's what we're going to bring to you tonight. So I do want to say before we get started officially is thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation, of course, for sponsoring this series and the series from previous years. If you're interested, you can go to the Museum of Discovery and Science YouTube channel, and you can see 3 years of this series going back. Many different distinguished speakers talking all about their research. So feel free to check that out. Tonight, if you have questions for our speaker, please feel free to ask. She'll be talking a lot about her research, but if you have that question, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get it asked, okay? Let's see. I think that's it for right now. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Rogers. We're so happy to have you and delighted to introduce you. Dr. Rogers is a marine ecologist whose passion for the ocean began far from the coast in central England, actually. After earning a Master's of Biological Sciences in Zoology from the University of Sheffield, she gained hands-on experience diving and volunteering in places like Honduras and French Polynesia, experiences that really solidified her path in marine biology. She completed her PhD at Imperial College London, where she studied the recovery of a keystone sea urchin species vital to Caribbean coral reef health. Dr. Rogers went on to work at the University of Queensland in Australia, where her research helped inform sustainable fisheries management in the Caribbean and Southeast Asia. Since 2018, she has been based at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, where she leads the Marine Ecology and Ecosystem Modeling Group. Her work focuses on how climate change and human activities impact coastal ecosystems and how science can help these ecosystems thrive for generations to come. Tonight, she comes to us with her research having to do with Sevengill sharks. So, Dr. Rogers, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Lance. It's really great. I'm really excited to be here talking about the work that we're doing. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, we're excited to hear it from an area that's if for those of us that are here in South Florida, that's literally on the other side of the world from us. So,
yeah, exactly.
So we're excited to hear some cool stuff and see some cool imagery of interesting sharks. If you want to go ahead and please feel free to share your screen.
Sure
and then while you do that, I'll just go ahead and remind our guests, like I said, feel free to ask questions. You don't have to wait to the end. We will have a section at the end for Q&A, but if you have something, go ahead and type it into the chat. I'll see it and I'll be able to ask it on your behalf, okay? All right, Dr. Rogers, take it away.
All right. Well, hey, so thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about this project that I've been working on around the Broadnose Sevengill shark in Fjordland. It's kind of a dream bucket list kind of project for me. I didn't expect to necessarily be doing this kind of work, and so I'm really, really grateful to Save Our Seas for funding this and giving me the opportunity. But before I do that, I'll just, you said some of this stuff already, Lance, but I thought I'd just briefly talk a little bit about me and how I kind of ended up here, because it's been a bit of a journey. So as Lance mentioned, I grew up right in the middle of England. It's kind of as far from the sea as you can get in England, which I realize is a bit of a strange thing for Americans, where you could be a hell of a lot further away. But in England, I was far from the sea, and where I grew up was very much sort of just fields and things like that. And the sea was something that we visited on holidays. But I guess even from an early age, there was maybe a small inkling that I might be interested in the marine realm and in fish and things like that. So this was me on a holiday, cuddling all the fish that we saw when we were fishing. I did my undergraduate at the University of Sheffield, so I moved a little further north, but no closer to the coast, so still quite landlocked. And I did a degree in zoology, so animals was my thing, but still the marine realm was not fully on my radar, except that while I was there, I joined the University Dive Club, and this is me with the very silly shark hood, so maybe I should have known I would end up working with sharks at some point. And that's really what inspired my love of the marine realm. And I knew by the end of my degree that I wanted to shift into marine biology for my future career. In my fourth year for my research project, I kind of got as close as I could in a zoology degree, and I worked on guppies, these tiny little fish. And that's me artificially inseminating a guppy, which was pretty cool. From there,
Oh
as
my
Lance
gosh,
said,
that's
I knew
crazy.
that
They're so small.
so small. Yeah, it was. I'm glad to be working on something slightly bigger now, actually. It's a little bit easier to work with a slightly bigger animal. But yeah, I knew that at that point that in order to kind of get into a postgraduate program in marine, that I needed to get some relevant experience. So I used that as an excuse to go and travel around the world, basically. I went and worked for coral key conservation initially in Honduras, in Roatan, diving on the reefs there, which was an amazing experience. I spent some time in French Polynesia, in Moorea, helping a PhD student there that was working on cleaner fish, which was another amazing experience. And I thought, actually, you know what? A PhD in marine biology sounds amazing. Let's do that. But I went back to the UK, to Imperial College London, and I did my PhD there with this guy, Professor Kai Lorenzen, who is actually now based in Florida. So that's really interesting to kind of come full circle. And in fact, for the first 6 months of my PhD, I was also based in Florida. So in Sarasota at the Moat Marine Lab, where my supervisor was on sabbatical. So I have very fond memories of Florida. It's close to my heart. So it's really nice to be able to give this talk, though I never made it to the museum there. And as you said, for my PhD, I worked on the long spine sea urchin Diadema antillarum. So I was looking at how these guys were potentially able to recover from a mass mortality that they underwent in the 80s and doing some work on that. And I did some field work down in Curacao in the Caribbean. So that was awesome. I then went and postdoced over in Brisbane at the University of Queensland, working with Professor Pete Mumby in his lab, working on coral reefs, and I became really interested in the effects of climate change on coastal habitats, and especially the sort of implications for the services that these coastal habitats provide to people. I spent 5.5 years in Brisbane, and then I finally, in 2018, moved to Wellington, to Te Herenga, Victoria University of Wellington, which is where I've been based ever since. And this view here is actually the coastline where our marine lab is, which I'm currently the director of. So I feel very fortunate to have landed here, although I'm on the other side of the world from my home and my family. It's a pretty amazing place to live. And when I got here, I guess it was a period of time figuring out where I would work, where I would focus my research and my questions around the impacts of climate change on coastal ecosystems. And I landed, one of the places that I was very fortunate to visit relatively early on when I got here was Fjordland in the southern part of New Zealand. So I'm just going to orientate you there right from where we are. So this is Fort Lauderdale, and you can see just about how far away we're talking about. So all across the Pacific, down to the most southern part of New Zealand, and here into Fjordland, which, if you can imagine, these are all kind of very tall sort of peaks. It's a very remote and difficult to access location. But also, as you can imagine, looking at this topography, it's absolutely stunning. So of all that travel and all those places that I visited, I think I could say that there's nowhere quite like Fjordland. Fjordland is amazing, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful both above the water and below. It's very unique. So it has lots of fresh water input into the water, which means that you get these sort of dark, gloomy habitats underneath, but also unique animals there that are normally only found in the deep, like these black corals. But Fjordland, as beautiful and remote as it is, one of the things that became quite apparent over the last few years is that Fjordland, despite being pristine, despite having very, very little in the way of human impacts on the ecosystem, and a really amazing intact ecosystem with whales and dolphins and penguins and all the sharks and all the things, is still not immune to the sort of bigger impacts of climate change. So over the last few years, there's been a number of large marine heatwave events in Fjordland that have caused mass mortality events and actually put New Zealand on the map in the news. So some of the news made it all the way on an international scale, which is a big deal for New Zealand. We're hidden down in this corner of the world. So Fjordland isn't immune from these effects, and that's kind of where this whole project started. And so this boat actually is the MV Pembroke, which is close to our heart and part of where we spend a lot of our time in Fjordland. And the people that run this boat are Mitch and Catherine, Paul and Catherine Mitchell. Sorry, Mitch calls himself Mitch. And they reached out to us at the university back in around 2022. And they said, we are in Fjordland all the time and we notice things are changing and we want some support to try and study that change and monitor that change on a long-term basis. And Fjordland didn't have that kind of information because it's very hard to get there. It's often expensive to get there. And they reached out to us at the university and a bunch of other people as well and said, we want to support this. We want to set something up that helps us to understand the change that is happening in this beautiful place that we're part of. And so together with them and a number of other organizations, we set up something called the Southern Fjordland Initiative, which is really a sort of a commitment to work together on the long term and keep working here in Fjordland and trying to understand the changes that are happening and do things to protect this place. So the other person here that I will acknowledge and mention really early on is Professor James Bell, who I work really close with here at the university. And we've worked together in Fjordland for a long time now. So we're partners in all of this work. So we kind of there thinking, right, how do we make this long-term work happen? And one of the things that we needed was to obtain funding. And we thought, you know, what's really charismatic and gets funding is things that people really love and things that people are, you know, excited by. And the sharks of Fjordland are numerous and amazing. And we knew that because this is the kind of dives that we would have even sort of before we were working on the Sevengills. This is the Broadnose Sevengill shark. And we would often encounter these guys on our dives before we were working with them, and we were amazed by them. They're quite common. They come and check you out quite often, and they're basically the top predator in this environment. And so they have a big impact on everything that happens in Fjordland and everything that happens under the water. And that is what inspired us to apply for the funds to do some work on them and to understand how this changing climate down there might impact this top predator. And so I was very fortunate in 2023 to obtain funding from Save Our Seas Foundation to start this work. And the work really is about what might happen to the sharks in response to a changing climate. So we had 3 key questions that began with this project. So the first one that we wanted to understand was how changes in water temperature, things like ocean warming or heat waves, would influence shark movements. And to look at that, we sort of thought what's tractable in the first instance is look at seasonal changes in their movements and their behavior. How do they behave differently? When do they come into or out of this fjord system? The second one was we were interested to understand whether this sort of unique habitat of the fjords, these really deep, steep walls, might offer some unique benefit to sharks that are able to potentially use deeper water to avoid thermal stress. So as the surface waters heat, do they come and use these habitats and escape into deeper water to escape that stress? And the third one was really sort of thinking about the more ecosystem scale and thinking, does the availability of their prey, the things that they come in to eat, things like seals and big schools of fish and other sharks, are those things going to change as climate changes? And what impact might that have? So those are our 3 main questions. And before I really dig into them, I want to say right up front that this is a team. I'm just one of a team. And the main team, I just want to say, is amazing and awesome. And there was no way I would be able to do any of this work without them. So Dr. Ross Dwyer was a long-term friend of mine, actually, from Australia, who works on large animal movement. That's what he does. And I knew as soon as I thought about this project, there was no way I was going to be trying to catch and handle sharks without Ross's help. Dr. Britt Vanucci is based here in Wellington at NIWA, which is our National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research. And she's a shark ecologist, shark expert. So it made a lot of sense to bring Britt onto the team, and it's been amazing. And then I'd like to talk about Eva Ramey too, who is my PhD student, I think is online as well today. So hi, Eva. who joined kind of as we'd started the project, but is kind of we wouldn't be able to do this project without Eva's help and all the hard work she puts in. And she has actually her own Save Our Seas project, which I will let her one day hopefully be able to talk to you guys about as well. But not just these people, that's my main team, but this project has involved so many people. So many students from the university have come on boats with us and helped with this work. We've been supported by many, many organizations here in New Zealand and across the world. So I just want to acknowledge that this is really a team effort that takes a lot of logistics and a lot of work to do this work in such a remote place. So thank you to all these people that have worked so hard to make the project a success so far. Okay, so a quick introduction to the Broadnose Sevengill shark. So Notorhynchus sepidianus. He is amazing. So one of the things that, I mean, you can guess from their name, these guys have 7 pairs of gill slits. Now, most regular modern day sharks have 5 or sometimes 6, but 7 is kind of an ancestral feature. So based on this, we're pretty sure that these guys have been unchanged pretty much since the time of the dinosaurs, which is amazing. So they were kind of an old school shark, if you like, and they've obviously very successful, and we're starting to understand why that is. A couple of other unique things about them in terms of things that we're really interested in. They have these unique spot patterns, so we can start to identify individuals just from their spot patterns, which you see in things like whale sharks and stuff like that. They have their classic protrusible jaw and these really sharp replacing teeth. And I can attest to that. We've got really close to some of these teeth in the recent years. So they have really good, strong teeth. We know they're capable of eating a big, broad range of different things. And then they have this kind of small dorsal fin, which is quite different from some of the sharks you think about that have, they call it big, that big triangular fin in the middle of their body. These guys are actually pretty sleek all the way to the back, where they just have this quite small dorsal fin. So yeah, they're kind of the dinosaur of sharks, and really, really cool when you start to get close to them and learn about them. So let's tackle that first question first. I want to talk about how we tackled that, because that's the main question that we've really focused on for the first year or so of this project proper. So understanding how the movement of these sharks is influenced by changes in water temperature. Now, to do that, what we've done is we've set up the first array of acoustic receivers in Fjordland. So this has never been done in this habitat before, which has been really exciting. And how this system works is that you fit the sharks with a transmitter that transmits information on who the individual is, and in our case for this study, also on what depth they're at and what temperature their body is at. And it transmits that information that can be picked up by these passive acoustic receivers. So it transmits constantly. And how this works is that you deploy the receivers kind of strategically. And then when your shark swims within about 400 or 500 meters of one of these receivers, the receiver will record the information that comes from the sharks. So our first big trip that we went on in May in 2024, this was the first sort of big field trip. And I just want to point out here that southern Fjordland is so remote that the only way that we can actually get in is via helicopter. But we always have these big cheesy grins, because flying into Fjordland via helicopter is actually an adventure and a treat in itself. So this is us flying in to the Pembroke, the boat just here. So we fly in and we land on, unbelievably enough, a little cobbly part of that beach to start our trips. And in May, we were really excited. We were all together.
What time of the year is that?
This is in winter. So
I was asking
sort of autumn.
Oh, it says May.
This is in May.
So
yeah.
okay, so fall for you guys.
Yes, exactly. Yep. For us, it's fall. That's right. So all the seasons are backwards here. But we were so lucky. The first trip coincided with the period where I guess you guys would have had it as well, but all the crazy lights that were happening in the atmosphere. So we arrived and we were like, this is a great sign. We're going to have a brilliant trip. We've arrived to the aurora, and yeah, and it was an amazing trip. We got a lot done on that first trip, which we were delighted about. So what we did,
we're used to calling them we're used to calling them the Northern Lights. They're called the Southern Lights, for everyone to know.
For us, they're called the Southern Lights. Exactly that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is Fjordland. This is Southern Fjordland, the study area that we're working in this square here. So we've got 2 main sounds, Breaksea in the north and Dusky in the south. Then we have this extra kind of sound in the middle. And what I'm showing you here, all these points on the map, are places where we've deployed one of those acoustic receivers. The pink ones are all ones that we've deployed on small anchors. The blue ones are deployed on a very small number of existing moorings for boats, for example. And the green ones I'll talk a bit more about are deployed in really deep water and take a little bit of something else. If you can't really see it super well, but this chart is showing you this. Basically, the habitat here is extremely steep walls, so we have to really pick our spots to try and deploy these receivers because we have to scuba dive to do it, and we also have to try and minimize the distance between them to ensure that we're going to pick up information on our sharks that we tag. So this is what they look like. So this is one in real life. So we have a small anchor and a chain and some additional weight. And then we dive down to these and we fix our receiver onto them. And then we hope that we're going to be able to find it again in 6 months or 12 months time. We just returned from our trip, and so far there's only one that we haven't yet found. And I say yet because I feel like there's still a chance that we'll go back and find it. So yeah, so we went and we deployed 27 of these on scuba. And in order to get the data, you have to retrieve them. So we've just collected our first 12 months of data, which is amazing, just last week. 27 of these, and then this is us deploying one. So this is what we do. We go down and we just attach them with zip ties. Marine biology without zip ties, I can't really imagine how it would exist. But the other thing that we had, the challenge with the fjords, is some parts of the fjord are quite wide, but also extremely deep. And so if we only put receivers on either shore here, we would leave a gap where our sharks could escape from the fjord without us being able to know. And so we were able to deploy initially two of these deep water receivers that work on an acoustic release where we can drop them into very deep water, like we just did here, which seems crazy, this big expensive equipment, and we just dropped it to 200 meters into the deep of the fjord.
Oh, 200 meters. So, okay.
Yeah,
So
200
about
plus. I think
700
actually
feet.
our deepest one, I think maybe was like 360 meters, something like that. So really deep water.
Oh, wow.
And again, we just picked these up and they came back to the surface, which is amazing. So these guys, they work with an acoustic release system where we can use a thing at the surface to talk to them and tell them it's time to release, and a little bit at the bottom unscrews. And we hope that we've tied our knots really well and our floats are floaty enough to float them back to the surface. And they were. So we were really lucky. So they closed this gap in these sort of deep and wider parts of the fjord. This is I just want to share a lot of these images. I'd like to mention by name Matteo, because Matteo came on our first trip and is an amazing photographer and provided a lot of these wonderful images. So this is a typical sort of waiting to catch sharks, talking about the project, sitting in this beautiful, amazing setting and trying to remind ourselves every so often to look up and, and have a look around ourselves where it's amazing. So then we had to tag our shark.
How long were you in the area to deploy all and record data and stuff?
The first trip, I think we were on the boat for 7 or 8 days. So it was a lot of diving. We were in the water a lot, and they were long days because we spent the days diving and then we spent the evenings catching sharks, which was their sort of shark hour we discovered was around about dinner time. So we spent a lot of time catching sharks and then tagging them. So this is the tagging part where we have these transmitters, as I mentioned earlier, that send depth and temperature information, as well as the unique identity of the shark that we've tagged whenever those sharks swim within about 400 meters of a receiver. And to fit those, we have to catch the sharks. So we fish for them off the back of the boat, or sometimes we set lines close to the boat that we can go and check. And then it's a small surgery that we do to implant the tag in the shark, and that stays with the shark then from then on. But we can do this all within sort of about 5 minutes, and we keep the animals in the water and we monitor them and make sure that they're doing well, which is amazing. It's an amazing opportunity to get close to them and work with them. So this is one picture of that, and this is us just kind of catching one of our first sharks.
Are the Sevengills, are they ram ventilators, so they have to keep moving to breathe, or can you keep them still in the water and turn them upside down, use that immobility
yeah, so they're relatively slow moving. So yeah, they're kind of slow moving, cruisy guys, so they are able to keep their gills pretty well ventilated without needing to move fast. We work fast because we don't want
That's
them
good.
to, we want to minimize that time that we're keeping them still. But invariably the water's flowing when you're in the fjords anyway. And so, yeah, they do. You turn them upside down and they chill out, which we were really happy about. So even Ross, who had worked with many other sharks before, hadn't worked with the Sevengills. And when we caught the first few, we were amazed at how relaxed and docile they were, which was really cool. It doesn't look that way this way, but they really were. Once you get them secured and upside down, they're sort of like big puppies, really. So yeah, so we work with the sharks, and then after a few minutes. Pardon?
No, I was saying that's the case with a lot of species of shark. They have that that feature.
Yeah.
What makes it very convenient for researchers.
Very convenient. Yeah, it helps a lot when they just kind of relax once you've got them, which is really cool. So that was May, so we managed to tag a whole bunch of sharks in May, and we went back in October. This time we were spotted by the Department of Conservation on their boat, who have been a partner on our project, and we caught more sharks, and we were able to work with them. Went and retrieved a number of our receivers, partly so that we could just relax a little bit and know that we would be able to get them back. It was nice to find a lot of them. But we also still had a number of tags to deploy, and we wanted to collect some initial data so that we could see what was happening, make sure we weren't tagging all these sharks and they were disappearing, never to be seen again. But they weren't, which was amazing. So that was October. And then I will show you just a few kind of early results. So as I said, we just came back from the field actually last Saturday. And that's the point at which we collected most of our receivers and have 12 months of data. So it's all very fresh. And I haven't had much chance yet to look at it in depth, but I do want to share a number of kind of key things that we've learned so far. So I'll tell you a little bit about the sharks that we've caught. So we've had now 3 trips. So May 2024, October 2024, and then just last week. So in May, on our first trip, we were pretty happy with how things went. So we had 20 receivers as part of the project. And in the May, we caught 8 female sharks and 3 males. The females were generally big and the males were not so big. So they were kind of smaller males than what we sort of expected, which was kind of interesting. What made it more interesting was that when we went back in October, a few months later, we only caught males, and we fished in a lot of similar places. But we didn't catch any females. And the other thing was that the males we caught were quite large. So most of the males we caught in October were big males, which was all interesting in itself. At the time, it was the most important thing was we'd got our 20 tags out and we were delighted with that. But the differences in what we were catching was really interesting. And then this season where we just went back again was a bit different again. But the females were back, but then we also caught a few males, but again, smaller males. So, just from this really kind of very coarse look at the data, it looks as if there might be something happening in terms of the different sexes behaving differently at different times of the year. And so I did pull out some of our first 12 monthly data just yesterday to try and show you some of this and to have a little bit of a look and see if we could see any patterns here. And so I'll just try and orientate you to these figures a little bit. Sorry, Lance. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to translate units because here in the U.S. we use feet and inches, so instead of centimeters. But that's okay. No, the rest of the world uses 200, it.
200 centimeters is
so that's 5 to 7 feet. Yeah. 5 to 7 feet.
Yeah, exactly. 5 to 7 feet. So bigger than us. So the biggest ones were bigger than the biggest ones of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty reasonable size animals. But lots of tail. There are quite a lot of tail. So, they do feel big, some of the big ones that we've caught. But yeah, pretty cool. So I'll just orientate you a little bit to these figures. So what I did here was I just pulled out some information from the largest of the animals that we caught. And I've put the largest ones of each of the sexes that we caught are at the top, and then they kind of get smaller towards the bottom. So these are just the sort of the top 10, if you like, biggest sharks that we've got good information about. And what you're looking at here on these figures is on the y-axis, we've got the number of detections. So it's very coarse data. So these are the number of times that they have pinged one of our receivers in our array. And on the bottom, we've got time. So this starts from that beginning, that first trip in May, all the way up to just last week, basically. And just something that I think is really interesting here is that there's some inkling of a pattern here. So during these sort of winter months where we were catching females, it looks like the females are hanging around, and our large males from our data don't appear to be hanging around quite so much. But there's also this interesting gap in a number of our females that they go somewhere else during the summer, during the spring and summer, and we're not picking them up in our array. We don't know exactly where they're going, which is quite interesting. Whereas by contrast, during the summer, during the peak of summer here in New Zealand, which is sort of December, January time, it looks as if we're seeing more of our males come in. And that actually fits a lot of the anecdotal evidence of people that are in the fjords diving a lot. They say, you know, it's usually the summer they see lots of males and they're encountering lots of interested sharks. So there's possibility here that there's something going on in terms of the different sexes doing different things at different times of year. And this is something that we'll be able to dig into a lot deeper as we look at our data more carefully and collect more data. So they might be behaving differently. And one of the things that we'd like to look at here, so this is looks quite gruesome, but these cuts and scrapes on this shark were taken from a large female that we caught in May. And I can tell you now she was fine. So this didn't cause her any damage, but these are mating scars. So there was indications in May on the first trip that we were catching females that were potentially in the process of mating and breeding. And so we are wondering now whether that gap in time that we're not seeing them means they're going somewhere to pop, and we don't know where that is yet. So we're really, really keen and really excited to try and figure that out, and maybe adding some more receivers into our array and trying to figure out where these guys are going. So that's kind of an interesting finding so far. Another sort of interesting thing, but take this with a pinch of salt because I've not analyzed all the data yet, but one thing that does look a little bit sort of like a pattern in our data as well at the moment is that the different sexes are possibly doing covering different amounts of area within our system. So the females appear to be relatively more resident, so staying in one place, having a kind of a home where they hang out a lot. Although, like I say, we're not sure where they're going for some period of time, whereas the males seem to be cruising around a bit more. And again, that sort of fits what you would hear people say. So a lot of the boats that work down in Fjordland, on their moorings, they think they'll have like a resident that's hanging out there. And the females do appear to show that. And I want to just show you, this is sort of a coarse kind of output that we can get. So along the bottom here, this is those detections through time. And this is actually just for the first sort of 4 or 5 month period that I can show you from between May and October in the first year. And this is for a large female. And what you'll see on the map is you'll see where she was hanging out through time. So you can see these hot spots. So she's spending a lot of time in this place, Beach Harbour, which we knew was sharky. But now we're sure we can see the tags of many sharks that are spending a lot of time here. So we're really interested in this area to see what might be happening. So she's doing that. She's spending a lot of time there. Another female, this is a different female with quite a similar pattern. So she's a little bit more moving around, but she's also sort of got a home range. She's still hanging out in this same spot, which is really interesting. And I want you to compare that to this guy. So this is a male. We haven't picked him up quite as often, admittedly, but very different pattern of behavior when you watch this. So he's all over the fjord. He seems to be cruising up and down for the whole time. And again, has disappeared for some period of time. So these are really early findings. We've got a lot more to understand. And the next thing is to kind of look at these patterns in relation to temperature and to seasons. Now we've got our full year of data, which we're hoping to do in the next little while. But yeah, that's kind of where we got to with that question so far. So do watch this space. I will try and keep people updated on what we find as we start to analyze that data. But I just want to quickly talk about the next question, one of the second questions, and how we've sort of made a start on that as well. So Our other question was about whether these sharks are potentially moving into deep water to avoid thermal stress and extreme weather. We'll be able to get some of that information from the acoustic array that I just described to you. But as you can imagine, it's kind of constrained by the fact that you will only get information where a receiver is. And so we wanted to kind of get a bit more information than that. And so what we did, so this is the question, I guess, is the fjords are very deep and they're very steep walls. We know these guys hang out on the reef. We know they're eating reef fish, as you saw from that early video. So we know they associate with this habitat. And the question is, if you have a warming event, which has happened in Fjordland a number of times in the recent years, is this a great place? Like, do the sharks go and hang out in deeper, colder water potentially to avoid that? We think that's a really important and interesting question because of the topography of this fjord. It could make this fjord system something that sort of supports these animals in a future of climate change, where these extreme events might become more common. And to find out, what we've done is we've fitted 3 of our sharks with these satellite tags. Now, what the satellite tags do, so they're called these mini pack satellite tags, and you can see us here fitting one. I think this guy was called Hulk. He was one of our biggest sharks, and we're fitting this satellite tag to the small dorsal fin. This is where them having a small dorsal fin isn't super helpful, but we'll let them off. The satellite tag records depth, light, acceleration, and temperature on a constant basis. So it's recording this in really fine scale, regardless of where the animal is, which is quite different from what we get from our acoustic array. And it'll give us fine scale movements and behaviors that we can then relate to things like the temperature at different times and different depths. We fitted 3 of those on our October trip. And they were fitted to automatically release and pop off the shark after 12 months. 2 of them have already popped off, which is not surprising. We would have liked them to stay on for a full year, but it's not surprising. That's quite common. And we've got some information from them because they transmit their data to a satellite, but we've just got that in really recently, so I haven't got anything to show you there much. But we need to try and find them. Ideally, we try and retrieve those tags, and they give us a lot more information. So we've got a bit of a treasure hunt to go in the next little while. And we have one of these still active that hasn't popped off yet, that we're hoping will stay on all the way to October, when we're hopefully next down in the fjords, and we'll be able to go and retrieve it from there. So these will tell us a bit more about this sort of behavior.
For those sharks that you put the satellite tags on, did you also put an acoustic tag in as well?
Yeah, so 2 out of 3 of them we did. So the thing with the satellite tags is that they need to be on a large enough animal. So you don't really want, as you can see, they cope really well with these, but it does create a little bit of drag. So we were really mindful of that, and we only wanted to fit them to the largest animals that we caught. So two of them were animals that we'd already fitted with acoustic tags, and then we kind of had one left, and we'd used up all of our acoustic tags because we didn't want to, you get the acoustic tags into any shark that you catch, really. But we hadn't caught a 3rd shark that was big enough at that point. And then on our last morning of our last day of that trip, we caught a really big male shark. But we'd run out of acoustic tags, but we fitted it with our satellite tag. So that was really cool. So that's actually, I think, the one that's the one that's still swimming around.
No, I was saying that relates to one of the questions. We had a question about how do the satellite tags affect how the sharks swim. And I apologize for our audience. It seems like we have a slight delay going to the other side of the world from Florida to New Zealand right now. So that's okay. We're dealing with it. So the satellite tags affect how the sharks swim. The question that was just asked, and you essentially answered that with they might if it's a smaller shark, right?
Yeah, so there's lots of this technique has been used on lots and lots of different sharks, and there's good evidence to suggest that they cope just fine with this. It's not a really big issue, and obviously with these guys, they're not sort of a fast, speedy shark. They're relatively slow moving, so we don't expect it to really influence them. But we just wanted to be mindful of that and not fit a tag on a small shark. So yeah.
Great.
Cool. All right, so just coming to the end then, I guess. This, as in any of this kind of research, we have many more future and more questions that come up. So we've still got that third question, that is one that we kind of tackle through time. So each time we go to the fjords, we collect baited underwater video footage in various different places at different depths, and that's helping us to build up a picture of what other organisms are in the fjords and how they might change through different times of the year. So some of the things that these sharks might eat. And I just want to show you this cool video that we often capture our Sevengills on the baited underwater cameras as well. So here's one of the crazy guys just coming in and showing off how beautiful they are. And as I said, we've just come back on Saturday from our most recent trip. So this was our team on a very rainy last morning, waiting for our helicopter to come and pick us up. And that's the Pembroke in the background. So there's more data to come. We've now been able, we actually got some additional tags from a great collaborator, Adam Barnett, who is really interested in the project and was kind enough to give us some additional tags. So we've got 8 more sharks in the study and more tags to fit in the coming months. So this climate change question is something that ideally, of course, is a long-term question. We can't really understand the effects of climate change over a year or two. So our hope and our ambition is to keep this array going for as long as possible. The sharks that we've tagged will transmit data for potentially up to 10 years. So, you know, the hard work's been done now, and if we can keep getting down to the fjords and service our array and collect our data, we're going to learn a lot more about what changes might be happening to these guys. Another thing that we do when we collect our sharks, so because of course it takes a lot of effort to capture these animals and to get them in a position where you can work with them, and so to sort of optimize that we take samples from them at the same time. So we measure all of the sharks, we record lots of information about them, their sex, we take photos to identify them. And we've been taking fin clips and biopsies and bloods as well from these sharks. And that's because we now are building up a database that can help us answer many more questions. At the moment, that's something we need to think about funding for, but we have a database that we're building up now that could allow us to answer a lot of other questions about these sharks, about how related they are. The bloods could answer our question about whether they're mating and breeding in these habitats. So there's lots of cool things that we're kind of trying to prepare to keep working on. And that's it. So I just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say, you know, Fjordland is a really special place. So I feel really privileged to be able to work there and work with these amazing animals. And thank you for kind of having me come and tell you about it today.
Yeah, of course. That's it's what an amazing place. The pictures you're showing are just like absolutely epic. It's on a bucket list for many people now, maybe to go visit.
It was for me. It was for me. And then you sometimes kind of pinch yourself when you're there. Think how lucky am I to come and work in this amazing place? So
Yeah. Well, we have a few questions for you. Thank you very much for sharing your research. I know that it's very early days as far as data is going, but you know, as we get more data, we'd love to follow you and maybe have you back to report more on it.
I'd love to.
And so my first question to you is, you talked a little bit how you might like expand your project and doing more tagging, different kinds of tags and this kind of thing, to get more granular data. We've had quite a few scientists come onto this series and talk about acoustic tagging and the power of acoustic tagging, with different arrays being used for many different species. So is that something that could happen in that the array is used for more than just Sevengill sharks? Could it be used for other species as well to study the same questions, right? But just for other species, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it's really timely. So Eva, that is doing a PhD with me here at the university, has actually got a small grant from Save Our Seas. And that is being used to study some of the other shark species in Fjordland, to leverage on this array. So this array is actually the first acoustic array ever to be placed in Fjordland, and it's one of the first in New Zealand. We haven't done a lot of it here. As part of the project, we've kind of tried to be open and share our array with as many people as possible. So we've kind of opted into an online database of information with Australia, which has been really interesting so far. And I mentioned this earlier to you, Lance, but the sharing of our information means that if our animals are picked up on someone else's array, we will know about it, and vice versa. And we've been picking up tags from animals in Fjordland that are not our animals, which has been really interesting. So we've got some information on animals that have maybe made their way here from Australia, which is really great for other scientists too, because we didn't know that before. We didn't know that there were animals that were making their way across the Tasman Sea into Fjordland. So that's really interesting and exciting, and something that we're really keen to be part of. So having an array here, there are also lots of our partners here in New Zealand, and particularly people working in Fjordland, that are excited by this, you know, this idea that we could share the responsibility of taking care of this array so that all sorts of different animals can be tagged and studied in this amazing place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can imagine lots of things, just to answer those questions about like where where do those sharks go when they leave, right? What is that just as you were presenting, and I was looking at the maps you were presenting, and what does the seafloor look like just to the west? Does it dive down super deep there in between in the Tasman Sea, or is it relatively shallow or similar?
It's pretty deep, but it's a quite a different habitat. I mean, the fjords, you know, like the coastal system just outside of Fjordland is very wild and rugged place. So there's not a lot of people spend much time out there. So the sea conditions are pretty challenging. So we struggle sometimes just to get to the outer part of our array. So it's a pretty wild place,
Oh, wow.
but full of animals, full of life. One of the things, like a part of this as well, is to try and get some of these receivers in different places. And actually, we've been really lucky to have support from Environment Southland, which helped to look after the southern part of New Zealand, and they've helped us to put one receiver on Stewart Island, which is much further south, kind of the south of the South Island. And we're just wondering, that's kind of a initial, I wonder if our Fjordland sharks make it out of here and head all the way to Stewart Island or further. So, you know, there's lots of questions still about how far these guys are going. And, you know, in a perfect world, we'd be putting these receivers all over the place and learning a lot more. But yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I think, well, Sevengill sharks have quite a broad distribution across the ocean, right? I mean, in California, we have the same species. They're probably different populations, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it seems like they move around quite a bit, you know.
Yeah.
That's
The satellite
so
tags as
fascinating.
well.
With the satellite tags, we'll be able to help you figure out where they're going beyond the acoustic. Yeah. I just find it so fascinating that there is a place like on the planet that is so unknown, right? And it's not even, I mean, much of it is below water, but the Fjordlands are just hard to get to. That's kind of blows my mind a little bit, right? And that there's still these wild places that have questions to be answered, right? It's so amazing. So thanks for giving us a sneak peek and getting to some of them. I want to, you told us all about, you know, you and your journey. It's quite inspiring to hear how you got started. If someone were looking to follow in your footsteps, you know, maybe they're interested in the ocean, but not quite sure where they want to go, what they want to study, maybe what kind of advice might you give someone following in your footsteps?
That's a great question. I think I didn't really take a direct route to where I am, and And I think if you'd have asked me a few years ago, would I be working with sharks in this place, I wouldn't have known that that was the case. Not that I'm not delighted to do it. So it's a tricky one. I think a big part of what's landed me here, if I'm honest, is people, meeting people. So I would definitely always advocate for networking, for going out and talking to people, um, making connections. I think that's a huge part of this. There's no way I would be able to do this project alone. This is very much a team project that brings together the skills and the, you know, and the knowledge of lots of different people from lots of different walks of life. So that's a big part of it. And if you're interested, I think, you know, talk to people that have been in the field. Like I say, I took a wiggly route to get here. I spent time volunteering my time to sort of learn some of the skills, and yeah, you know, getting out there and trying things out to discover what really you're passionate about, I think. There's a bit of luck thrown in there too, I would say.
Yeah, just trying things out. I think that's a following your passion, following the questions you might have. That is really great advice. My last question for you is just how can we stay in touch? How can the general public, how can we follow what you're doing? What advice would you give us in case we're interested in ocean conservation? How can we learn more, get involved?
Yep. So I guess the first point of call is probably the Save Our Seas website and the blogs and posts that we do on there. I have an Instagram page that I'm terrible at keeping updated, but often all the wonderful people that come with me are better at posting stories and tagging them onto there. So I guess that's
Put your
another
handle in
place.
the chat. Put your handle in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. The blog and that are the main things, and you know, I'm always happy if people are sort of super interested and want to learn more. I'm always happy for people to reach out to me directly. I'm not hard to find. I have an email address which is easy to find, and I'm if I find the time and when I can find the time, I'm very happy to talk to people and chat with them. So, and if anyone wants to sponsor a
Very
shark, we've got
nice.
lots of sharks with no names that could happily would take a
Okay.
name, and that would be awesome.
Oh, that's cool. So you can sponsor a shark. That's really interesting. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, feel free to follow Dr. Alice Rogers at Dr. Alice Rogers, Dr. Alice Rogers on Instagram. For those of you listening out there, go ahead and sponsor a shark. Get a tag on one, right? Do you let
Yeah,
people name them if they sponsor them?
Yeah, why not? We've got lots that we haven't named yet. So the Southern Fjordland initiative is probably the place. I'll put that one in the chat too. I have to remember what the website is. But if I write in the Southern Fjordland initiative, you would find it. I believe they have on the website ways that you can support financially should you want to. And for sure, if we've got many a shark that we keep meaning to name, it's very hard to remember the numbers of sharks. We have a few with names, but not so many.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really do appreciate your time and offering a glimpse into what you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I'd love to come back and tell you more when we have some more data to talk about.
Sure. We'd love to have you back. And you can join us next time. Speaking of coming back, next time on June 8th, we have Jillian Morris is joining us again. This will be the third time she's joined us, and going to give us a little update on her project Lemonade, talking to with lemon sharks in the Turks and Caicos. If you would like to register, you can go to the website right there, mods.org/STEM Learning Series. You can register, scan the QR code, and yeah, we'd love to see everyone there. Thanks again to the Save Our Seas Foundation for allowing this series to keep going. We really appreciate all the support that they offer, and all the support to all the researchers and scientists and educators out there in the world. So thank you all very much from the Museum of Discovery and Science. This we'll sign out from here. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.